have a special guest. He served as the former CEO of Bluebell Ice Cream, Ricky Dickson.
Well, thank you so much, and I love Faithustle. Let's do it.
Thank you.
I just fell in love with what I saw. I came on board in 81. We had just come into the Dallas market. It's almost like catching a moving train. I jumped on, and man, we took off, and really never looked back. I truly believe that God was using me where He wanted me, and it wasn't ice cream. I want to make sure it was all about using ice cream as the center point.
Yeah.
But really working with people. I think a lot of times leaders want to come in and they want to make their own mark. And when you start shifting it to a me thing or an I thing, look at what I've done, for whose glory. And if you're doing it for your glory, then it can get muddied very quickly.
How many employees did Bluebell have?
We were about 3,500 total employees for the company.
As someone who aspires to be at that stage, maybe the C-level suite stage, what were some of the pivotal things that you put in place to be able to lead, 3,500 people? Welcome to the Faithustle podcast, where we help young Christian entrepreneurs learn how to build their business and careers God's way. My name is Mukwenda. I'm your host. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 10 years, and in that time, I've been mentored and guided by some of the most successful entrepreneurs that weren't just crushing it in business, doing well in that area, but in their family life and in their relationships and in their devotion to Christ. They had a holistic view of success, and that was attractive to me. And that's what we are striving for here at Faithustle. We teach on 5 pillars on this show. We teach on being spirit-led, on having a heart of stewardship and integrity, humility, and generosity. Those are the 5 things that we believe makes up someone that has a faith hustle. And if that describes you, that describes also what you're pursuing. I want to encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, whether you are watching on YouTube or listening on Apple or Spotify or any other medium. We are probably there. We would encourage you to jump on this journey with us as we grow together. And if you've been listening for any amount of time, would you leave us a review? It helps a ton so that we can get the word out to more people to help them in their faith hustle. Thank you so much for the support. It's been, literally we get messages all around the world, from London to Tanzania a few weeks ago to Paris. It's just been incredible. And so thank you for being on this journey with us. And on today's episode, I have a special guest. You will recognize this man's career, almost 40 plus years with the same company, Bluebell Ice Cream, which is literally one of my favorite ice cream. And so I'm very happy that he's here. I'm going to ask him secretly if I can get like a discount or something, a lifetime discount. But he has served faithfully. He served as the former CEO of Bluebell Ice Cream. He wrote a fantastic book called One Scoop at a Time, which we'll get into. But he is here today in the Faithustle studio. Thank you so much for coming, Ricky Dickson.
Well, thank you so much, and I love Faithustle. That's spot on. Let's do it.
Thank you. Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. I want it to be a verb,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And I know you guys came in. I know you've been making several stops, but you live in Oklahoma City.
That's correct. Yes. After 43 years, retired this past March, turned in my scoop. Actually, I kept it because I still use it.
There you go. Yeah.
What a journey. God has blessed us unbelievably throughout the career. And now we're just excited about what He has for this next season. I tell people I didn't retire, I refire.
I love that.
We're getting back after it and just having a blast doing it.
I love it. And I can see it in your eyes. I mean, retirement has never seemed attractive to me. It's never seemed fun of like, oh, I just get to play golf all day. I mean, that would be fun, but not all day. After a while, you're like, okay, let's do something. Let's help people. And so it's cool to see that in this next stage that you're in, that you're committed to helping people.
Yeah, no question. I can't find it anywhere in Scripture that says, you get to go sit on the porch and rock the rest of your life away. He calls us to go out and make disciples.
That's true.
So we can do that at work. We can do it at home. We can do it in the neighborhood. But at this season of life, I like to say, and it's been used a bunch, but as I enter the fourth quarter of being 65, usually that's when let's strap it up. We got a game to win. We're going after it. We're just, like I say, having a blast doing it and seeing what God has in store for us.
I love it. Well, thank you for all that you've done and that you are doing. I got to ask you to tell the story, and part of the reason why your story was so interesting to me was it is very rare, especially in the age demographic that we are in the 20s, the early 30s. I can't tell you how many friends, and there's, it's not a bad thing necessarily, but have jumped around so many jobs in like a 5-10 year period. Right. It is very rare for one person to stay at a company. Honestly, even 5 years is like, wow, you are really committed. But 40 years, I mean, that's a, I love to just, maybe the snapshot of that journey of starting in, I believe it was 1981.
Right. Yes.
I love to hear that journey, how you kind of, went from where you were and kind of kept rising and kept going throughout the years.
Sure. I think, and you hit on a great point where does God want to place us? And I think that question probably as early as in high school, you start wondering, you take, placement tests, and they kind of try to get you in a direction that you should be going. But at the same time, I believed with all my heart that God had something planned for me. And so then I was, the unknown of what is that? How do you find that? Who do you marry? Where do you live? And then, of course, what kind of a career do you have? And so, as I've stated in the book, I was dating a girl at the time in high school. She wanted to go to Baylor. I wanted to be with her. So we both end up at Baylor. And the first week we're there, we break up.
Oh, wow.
But that's one scoop at a time. While there, though, I was given an assignment in a marketing class to follow a company for a full semester on how they relate and reach, how the company relates to the consumer. And so I went back to the apartment, called my dad, and said, "Can you help me with this? You have any idea?" And he said, "Right now, I'm reading an article about this little ice cream company down in Brenham, Texas. You may want to check it out." And I'm thinking, ice cream, sure, you bet.
That's not a hard sell.
So I went down, and really, it's what I saw was just really. It just seemed different. The culture seemed different. The people really, truly. We're making ice cream, as I like to say, for memories, not necessarily for just the taste. And so it really intrigued me. So I'm giving a long answer, but really the home in on this is, how do you find what you're supposed to do and the purpose behind it? I truly believe God has a purpose for us.
Amen.
So as I prayed, God, open the door for where you want to place me. Give me the passion to go with that purpose. And so I think you're right. I tell the new employees that would come on board, met with almost all the management teams as they would come in. And I would always say, 10 years from now, we're not going to all be here. That's just statistics. But if you're not where you're supposed to be, then go find it. Go put yourself in a place that you can be used, but in a way that you have the passion. The other element to that, though, that I like to incorporate is patience. Because if you know you're at where you're supposed to, and you have the passion, then you're going to have that patience to develop in a way that he can use you. We can probably talk more about that later. But I just fell in love with what I saw. Came on board in 81. We had just come into the Dallas market. And so I just, almost like catching a moving train, I jumped on and, man, we took off. And really never looked back. It was never, I don't think any moment in time in my career where I flat out said, I'm done, this isn't for me anymore. Because I truly believe that God was using me where he wanted me. And it wasn't ice cream. I want to make sure it was all about using ice cream as the center point.
Yeah.
But really working with people and, as we would say at work, making memories.
Wow.
So anyway, I know it's unusual, especially today. You do see people jump from one place to the other. I don't really have a problem with that as long as they know that when they're jumping because that's where God's having you jump.
Right, exactly.
If you're really where you're supposed to be, then, like I say, I prayed for the passion. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And not every day. I had some friends that always say, well, every day I go to work. That's great. But not every day. But I would say that probably the high 90s. I really enjoy getting up. And,
exactly.
If you're having a bad day, go get a scoop of ice cream.
Hey, I'm about to say, like if you're having a bad day, that's a great place to work.
That's right.
Or dangerous.
True. Very
but
true.
I love that. I mean, so part of my background, I came from advertising, and I worked at an agency, and one of our clients was Chick-fil-A. And, getting to hear firsthand from the executives of the agency, like, they met with, Dan and Kathy, their first meeting, he's in a boardroom, he's opening up, reading scripture and starting with a word of prayer. And they're like, oh man, this is different. We're like, we like this. And, and I do think that, like you said, culture, which really culture comes down to the vision of the leader.
Well, that's true.
Right. That like that's because you could put words on a website and like,
fancy slogans.
We believe in this. But if the leader's not living it out, what's going to be felt is whatever the leader lives out. So I guess what about Bluebell stood out to you of like this was huge in their culture that just made an impact on you to keep growing with them? Have you been listening to this podcast and thinking to yourself, man, I want to start a faith podcast too? Well, guess what? You can. It's never been easier than ever to start a show and to get it out to the masses to make an impact for God's kingdom. But it's also never been harder. 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3, not because there's a lack of good ideas. There is a lack of good foundation of what makes a great show. Making a great show is actually an art. It's actually a skill. But good news is it's a skill that you can learn. That's why I put together a free resource for you that explains the 5 things every podcast needs to make it a great show. It's a quick read, but it will be the difference of your podcast going the distance and making an impact. Now more than ever, do we need more faith-based podcasts to enter into the space to be a light into the darkness. And I believe this resource can be your first step. All you got to do is hit the link in the description below and I'll send it to you for free. Now let's get back to the episode.
I think 2 things immediately come to mind. The first is the vision from, you said, the leadership. The Cruzy family really had, from 1919, we started in 1907 as a butter company.
Oh, wow.
In 1911, we started making ice cream of the excess cream. In 1919, E.F. Cruzy took the company over and was president or general manager. He passed away in 51, and his 2 young sons, Ed and Howard, really took us from that period all the way. Howard Cruzy's still on our board of directors. Ed was phenomenal. They were unique in their own personalities, but had just tremendous, not only work ethic, but they had a really good way to communicate the vision of where they wanted to take us. And it was long term. It was not next week or, next year. We want to do this for the long haul. I remember young in my career, Howard Cruzy saying, it's a cinch by the inch, hard by the yard. I'm finding that that's not said today. Because people haven't heard that, but a cinch by the inch meaning, personally, to be number one usually is what you want. You want to be the number one company. His philosophy, or the philosophy of the company, I should say, was to be the very best you can be where you're at, but don't outpace yourself. Because so many companies they hit it hard. I like to say Shark Tank moments. You get to this point, and then, okay, now what do we do? Do we take the next leap of faith? But you don't get ahead of yourself. And so they really instilled that. Just take one market at a time. We were only in the Dallas. When I started, Dallas, Houston, and Austin. We were not in San Antonio. We were not in Waco, where I wrote the paper. In fact, first taste of Bluebell, me and a friend got in a car and drove to Temple, Texas.
Oh, wow.
Because that came out of the Austin branch, and got a half gallon of strawberry ice cream.
Come on.
That was the first flavor, the first taste. Put that half gallon between us in the car, popped the lid, and drove back. And
it was gone
empty by the time we
by the time you were there, it was
we
gone.
wanted to turn around and go back. We thought, no, this will probably put us under.
Exactly.
But it was really that just let's work hard. Let's work hard together. Understanding what the vision is, understanding what the goal is, but nothing was beyond them. They would be willing to do whatever it took. They would lead beside you and not be the boss per se. And that just stayed with me. I thought, if they're willing to roll up their sleeves and get in there, share the dream and work, and know that what you're doing is for the good then it was an excitement.
Wow.
You missed a day of work, you really truly felt like you missed something. Like what happened yesterday? What went on, because things were really happening very, very rapidly. Stuff like cookies and cream came out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, those flavors, they're still great.
Absolutely. So,
wow.
Anyway,
no, that's powerful. I mean, two things that come to my mind from that. You're absolutely right. It's not. I mean, one of the quotes that is famous right now in our culture is "Success loves speed," or and so it's like, hey, the faster you go, and Silicon Valley, they kind of took the trail running of
right.
Everybody raises all these millions, but the reality is like that's not everybody's story.
That's right.
And I think a lot of times we see the Chick-fil-A's, we see the Bluebells, and we're like, hey, I want to get there now, and if more money means that, and hiring a lot of people, but
right.
you may be underdeveloped as a leader to sustain it, then you burn out. And a lot of times we see a lot of companies that just don't make it. Patience, what you said. I think a lot of times we want what we want, and we want it now.
That's right.
And we have a culture that says, hey, you can get it now, you can buy it now, you can you can cut corners or all those different things. But rarely do you a lot of times, I mean, you see it where, let's take an Uber, for example. And I mean, I love Uber. I use it. But they built really fast, and they had to let go of their CEO because there were so many cracks in the foundation from the speed. Yeah. And so it's cool to see that's what stood out to you. And I think for anybody watching, I think the value of patience, which it's a fruit of the spirit, but
that's right. No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right.
But it's not a. I notice of all the fruits of the spirit, that's the one that we rarely like to pray about because we know that means traffic.
Right. I've always said I'd be a terrible doctor because I really have very little patience.
Yeah, exactly.
Terrible joke, but no, I think that because what happens is it lends you to it puts you in a position to compromise. When you're going at such a rapid pace and things start to get out of control, to make the machine continue to go pushes you to potentially compromise, and you don't want to be in that position. You want to make sure that what you do every day you're doing for the right reason, for the right cause. We had a little slogan that we used that said we want to consistently meet the expectation that drives the passion. So if you go to Florida and you get a half gallon of butter pecan or homemade vanilla, it better taste
the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we did a lot of cross comparisons and taste tests just to make sure that what we were doing consistently, because the passion's what kept us going, and still to this day keeps us going.
Wow.
Even as a retired person, I want to buy it and take it home, and I still want it to taste exactly what my expectation is. So
100%. And yeah, we consistency of experience. I mean, again, that's what builds great brands of like, hey, you go into a Chick-fil-A, you go in to buy Bluebell ice cream, it's going to taste the exact same, the same formula, and hopefully with the same experience that you're going to get. But that I don't think that doesn't come overnight. That's a lot of testing and perfecting, and I guess and this was not in my notes. What in your experience, again, growing with the company, because you mentioned when you take your time and grow at a steady pace, it allows you to, maybe not take opportunities that, would decimate it, but you can be more wiser. Do you remember a time when there was maybe a decision that the company were like, yeah, we could do that, we could expand really fast, but we're not going to do that, and you kind of saw almost like the fruit of that culture point of, hey, we're going to go steady?
Right. No, I mean, especially in those early days when we were only, again, in the markets that I mentioned, the Dallas-Fort Worth, people were bootlegging the product in the markets. They would come down. Oh, yeah. They were, bringing a freezer on the back of a pickup truck, going in and looking for the $1.99 special and buying out the store, and taking it back. And you'd think, man, why can't we just go on and go there? But at the same time, and I think you said it beautifully, is your personnel properly trained? Do they understand, again, the culture? Will they keep that pace at the same level? And it's easy to want to run to that. Today we're only in 23 states.
Really?
We still have not all half. Now a couple of them it'd take a little bit of effort to get the truck to Hawaii.
Oh, really?
I mean, we don't go to Hawaii.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
I'm saying it would be a hard drive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's back to the cents by the inch and making sure we have a unique way of doing it. We make the product ourselves and we store it, put it on our own trucks, take it to our own branches, and then go to the store with our own personnel.
Oh, wow. So there's no middleman.
There's no middleman, and we do it because of the nature of the product. We want to make sure, again, that it's in the condition that it should be when you get it to the house. And so with that, we don't go through warehouses. That would be a lot easier. I mean, we could do that tomorrow and be in the entire country. But we want to make sure when you try Bluebell for the first time, or you've been eating it all your life, that it's what you expect, because it takes you somewhere. It takes you to grandma's house. It takes you to a memory of some kind, a celebration of some kind. And so we take that real serious, and we don't want to jeopardize it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember my first experience with Bluebell was before I moved here. This is probably 6 years ago. And a family that I still am very close with. We do family dinners together. I'm like kind of an adopted member of their family, their bonus son, they call it. And we just do life together and all this different stuff. And I remember they were the first ones that exposed me to Blue, because we didn't have it up north. Right. I didn't have it in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, and in Michigan we didn't have it. We had other brands. So I came down here and they're like, "Oh, you got to have Bluebell." And I remember I went to their church. The pastor's talking about Bluebell and and they're giving out Bluebell ice cream, little ones of them, for on Sunday morning, like as like a summer treat.
Now that'll preach.
Yeah,
that'll preach.
That's a great message. I get saved if you offer that. And I was like, man, what's the hype of this? And then I tried. I'm like, oh, got it. Yep, makes sense. And it does remind you of when I was a kid and going down to the street to the local kind of store, and it's that homemade kind of feel. And yeah, I mean, I do think great brands that are built well, yeah, they take you to those places, and they hold core. I mean, it's the same reason why there's. I don't know if you remember the study that happened a long time ago of Coke and Pepsi, and people they took the labels off, and then it seemed like more people actually like Pepsi with the label off, and then they put the label back on. They're like, "You actually like Pepsi?" But they're like, "No, there's no way. I'm a Coke guy." When I was young, and so, like. It literally did something in their brain of reminding them of those memories. That's what a great brand can do. And so, I mean, I've seen the impact of it, and it's impacted me.
That's good.
That's so awesome. So I guess your experience, you were starting. What role did you start in?
I started in what they call a territory manager.
Okay.
Here in Dallas, part of the territory, we had 4 territory managers. So you think of Dallas Fort Worth split in like a pie.
Yeah.
With 30 right down the middle, dividing, and so. Pretty much you're overseeing, the stores that fall into that territory, and you're working with the driver salesman, you're working with the stores, making sure they're, properly serviced and have the right flavor selection and things like that.
Awesome.
So that's where I started.
Gotcha. Okay, so you started there, and then what were kind of your other roles as you kind of went on?
Well, as a branch setup, as we described, so from there you would have what we call a sales manager, and he would oversee the territory manager. So the primary job is overseeing all the sales, and then a branch manager that oversees not just the sales but also the workings of the office shipping department, making sure the products that are coming up from Brenham or from we have 3 plants. Are you're stocked accordingly, and so you're running the branch, and then from there you have what we call a regional manager that oversees the entire 8 or 9 branches.
Gotcha.
So,
well, okay, yeah. So each position. I mean, that's that's not an easy thing to keep moving from position to position to position. What kind of helped you as you were growing in your career to adapt to the new thing that they were asking you to do?
Well, two things immediately come to mind. Number one would be the fact that it was working, and the consumer was really the driving force behind the new market. So as new markets were opening up, it's because the consumer in the next market was saying, "Well, you're in Beaumont, but you're not in Lake Charles, Louisiana. So why aren't you in Lake Charles?" And that consumer demand was huge, and so that really helped a lot. But in my personal career, and I like to share it in the book. In fact, I have a chapter on really with the God moment of my life was things did happen very fast. I went from territory manager to sales manager to branch manager within about a 3-year period.
Wow.
I'm 24 and I'm in San Antonio, where I'm from, 2 miles from my mom and dad's house. I mean, I'm thinking I've just hit pay dirt. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
And a few years later, about 3 years later, they called and said, this was in the mid 90s. So 1989, we're going to leave Texas and go into Oklahoma City with our first out-of-state branch. We'd like for you to come, eventually maybe a new region. And so I thought, this sounds great. Let's do this. And so I came up, and I'll be honest, it got really, really quiet. The phone call didn't come to say it's a new region. Days went to weeks to months to years. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm up here. And then the phone call did come. They said, we'd like to meet with you after this dinner that we were having as management team. Went into the room, sat down, and I could tell this was not a celebration. There was no balloons. There was no confetti.
Yeah.
In fact, it was just, you could sense, okay, something's up. And for about 45 minutes, we went through this things that Ricky Dickson used to do that isn't doing, or things that you should be doing that you've overlooked. And unknowingly, I had drifted from center. There was no markers on the road on the right that bounced me back in.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking I'm going to get promoted to this new region. It was just the opposite. So I go back to the hotel room, sit on the bed, and I'm thinking, God, I thought you asked me to come here. I thought this was your will for me to be here, and I, move the family, and we're all here. And very, very clearly, I heard, I didn't move you here for your promotion. I moved you here for my purpose.
Wow.
And that's exactly how I felt like.
Yeah.
And it hit me between the eyes.
Wow.
I had focused and really got ahead of myself. And I tell this to people that want to aspire. I'm a dreamer. I mean, there's great. You got to have a vision. You got to have a dream. But at the same time, you don't want to lose where you're at. You got to make sure you focus on the job at hand. And I had really, unknowingly, I didn't intentionally do it, but I had gotten comfortable. And two things. One is I could have gotten up and walked out and said, well, I'm just going to take this on the road and find something else. But it was just the opposite. I thought if they saw enough in me to have that conversation, they still believed in me.
Wow.
And also thought if God has me here for a purpose, then I want to make sure I don't miss his purpose.
Wow.
So those two things changed 6 years later when that position did finally get filled. It wasn't by me.
Wow.
In fact, I find myself, I'm running our manufacturing plant in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. A marketing journalism major.
Wow.
Running an ice cream plant, but had an unbelievable peace through that because I knew I wasn't there to make the ice cream. I was there to just keep the hands on the steering column, make sure we're going in the straight direction, and really work with those employees to make them as best as they could be.
Yeah.
And so I just immersed myself into their lives and really thought that would be where I would land for the rest of my career.
Wow.
And about 6 years later, they asked me to come back home to the sales side and became the general manager down in our corporate office and oversee the entire sales force.
Wow.
But if I hadn't had that period of time that I saw both sides of our company, when the opening came to be president, I wouldn't have probably been considered because those 6 years of running the plant really gave me an insight that I would have never have had. So thankful that I chose A, God, I hear you, and I'm going to obey, versus B, it's my show, and you already told me how great I am, and that's just it. I'm not that great. I mean, I'll be real honest with you.
I'm right there with you. Wow.
But he equips us, and that's where I go back to the dream. If you really understand this is where you're supposed to be, and that was just validation, then God, wherever you then put me from this point on, just continue that passion within me, no matter what it is.
Wow.
And the third element's patience. Again, if we come back to patience, whatever it is. And so, that was the mid-'90s. And then 2017, they asked me to step into the role of president. And I knew then that was also a definite God thing.
Wow.
Because, only he could take me and say, we're going to put you here to do this at a time that was really tough for the company. And we rolled the sleeves up and went after it till it was time to turn in the scoop.
Wow. That's beautiful. I think, so much of that inspires me. I think something I often say on the show is that our next is connected to what's now. And I think, like you said, we can get very much like we can live in the future, but forget hey, this is not a waste, right? Like,
That's right.
like, I mean, biblically speaking, there's tons of examples of that. David, right? The time he spent in the field with the sheep, right? And killing the lion, the bear. None of that time was wasted because when Goliath came, he was able to use those things. And even Jesus, I taught, I have a small group that I lead with a brother of mine from my church. And we were talking on Luke 2, where it says, Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, have favor with God and man. The reality is, Jesus, I mean, and I'm not saying he was trying to jumpstart his purpose, but, he was teaching in the synagogue and all those different things, right? Sure. And then his parents were like, hey, we're going to slow this train down. And it says that he willingly submitted to his parents. We don't hear from Jesus again for 18 years.
That's right. That's right.
But clearly that wasn't a waste of time, because in those 3 years of ministry, every law was fulfilled, right? Every prophecy and, salvation, came. And so I do think, again, why I love this conversation we're having is that I do think patience is a lost art. In our, not just our society, but in my age demographic, that again, we want what we want right now. And there are anomalies of people who seem to get there faster, but
That's right.
but no one really talks about the repercussions of that. And what that does. And so I just think that's so cool. And then how, like you said, if you weren't in the manufacturing side, you wouldn't have the full scope and picture of the whole business that ultimately helped you as a president and CEO. And so I just think that's beautiful.
Well, there's and again, I'm talking too much on the book, but at the same time, it's this perfect illustration, which it's one of my favorite. The chapter's called Chinese Bamboo Tree. And I don't know if you've heard the Chinese bamboo tree, but it's out of all the bamboo that's grown, it's the largest tree that grows. It grows 90 feet.
Wow.
90 feet. And it takes 5 years from the time you put a seed in the ground till it hits 90 feet. Now here's where it gets fun. For 4 years and roughly 47 weeks, you don't even see it come out of the ground.
Really?
Or if you do, you barely see it come out of the ground.
Wow.
But during that time, you have to water, fertilize, cultivate, water, fertilize, cultivate for 4 years and 46, 47 weeks. But when it comes out, it launches to the sky.
Wow.
90 feet. And so I love that, because so often we're like, am I stuck? Am I growing? Am I doing?
Yeah.
And yes, you're being molded and shaped.
That's beautiful.
And I asked the question, how long does it take to grow a Chinese bamboo tree? 5 years or 5 weeks? 5 years. And if you don't do all the things during that 5 years, that 47th week, it never comes out of the ground.
It's a waste.
It's a waste.
Wow.
So anyway, I love that. Like I say, I have a whole chapter titled "The Chinese
I
Bamboo
love
Tree."
that.
But it's just
that's
a perfect
so awesome.
example of what we're talking about. Is because it's like anything. I mentor students both at Baylor and Oklahoma Baptist University, and when I sit and visit with them, so often at their junior, senior year, they're saying, but I don't have that job yet, or I haven't met the right person yet, and I keep saying, just trust. You're being shaped, molded, and they're being shaped and molded, no matter where or who it is.
Right.
So just trust. And so anyway,
this speaks to me. It really does.
Good.
And I mean, it's like almost like the same thing with bamboo. It's like a skyscraper. I remember, you go in the city and all you see is fencing around and just dirt, and you're like, what are they doing? Like they're not doing anything. And it's like 2 years of that, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, where did this building come from?
Exactly.
Out of nowhere. And it is, the foundation is critical, and I do hope that, and even especially through this platform, part of my desire is that we can build an entrepreneur business community, people who are in their careers that don't just have a desire to grow fast, but to last long.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's right.
If that, to your bamboo analogy, if that bamboo doesn't do what it's needed, it may grow, but it might not be strong when it grows. It might
reach
its
its potential or
exactly,
whatever,
or be able to one wind, one bad storm hits it gets knocked over.
That's right.
I think that's just beautiful. I do have a question. Again, you're a C-level executive at a company. When you stepped into the role of CVO, how many employees did Bluebell have?
We were roughly around 33 to 3,400. When I left, we were about 3,500 total employees for the company. So
that is, yeah. I have a small team of like 3, and that is a lot to manage.
Well, I had a lot of great people around me. There's no question. And then it went all the way to the branches, and it really literally takes everybody to do it right.
Yeah.
Like a relay race, if you don't hand the baton off the right way, it drops, then no one wins. And so we were just blessed to have, and still are. I still talk to the president. You know, I know I'm retired, but it's a family.
Yeah.
And that's, I can still get the ice cream, but I miss the relationship so that are built. But a lot of people.
Yeah.
No question.
What helped you to, and again, like, people, they're going to grow at different stages, but, if someone who aspires to be at that stage, maybe the C-level suite stage, even from your experience, through the years, what helped you in that role? Like, what was some of the pivotal things that you put in place to be able to lead, 3,500 people and to make sure all the wheels were moving and everybody was on the same page?
Well, I think that number one is, again, use Romans 12 as my little template. I believe that you start with yourself, offer yourself as a sacrifice, and make sure you're right and stay healthy. Make sure as it goes on, that you're not any better than anybody. You're all equal. You all have a gift. You all have a talent.
Yes.
And then from there, genuinely love those that you're working with, and then work as if you're working for the Lord, which of course is Colossians, but it's also Romans 12, and then it ends with pray for your enemies. So you have this chapter that I've always used, but I think I've just found that I like to manage the way I want to be managed. I want to guide and lead and not be a boss by any means. I want to be able to work with you, to equip you, that I can move on to work with and equip someone else. And so if I'm in that role, and I've had employees come and say, I would one day like to be ... Knowing that, I think, is you've identified something, as the employees identified, this is what I'm striving for. And then I thank them. Thank you for letting me know where your vision is, or your and I've had this happen. That's where you want to be. Man, I'm so glad to know that. Now, let me tell you, I'm going to shoot straight. Today, I can't recommend you for it. And let me tell you why. And here are the things that you would need to do if that's really your dream. Now, you're doing great.
Yeah.
But if you want this.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's in their wheelhouse. It really is genuinely.
Yeah.
I interviewed a guy way back in San Antonio, and I said, where do you want to be in 20 years? He said, I want to be CEO of Bluebell. And I said, okay, we now know what your end goal is. Are you willing to do the patience and the work to get there?
Be in the manufacturing.
Go back to. So I think that it's great to dream. I think it's great to be able to aspire. I will tell you, I would love to be a professional golfer. But I learned that wasn't my purpose.
It's not mine either. Trust me. Trust me. Yeah.
But I think it's critical to identify those that especially the people that you're managing directly around you, and then from there they should be doing the same thing all the way throughout the company to assist and try to get that individual where they believe they're supposed to be. But here's key: home in on for sure their strengths, but be honest with their weaknesses. And if you can develop those two. If maybe they're just missing something. There's nothing more humbling to have an employee come in that did a self-evaluation and they're giving themselves 9s and 10s, and you're looking at 4s and 5s.
Wow.
And you go, okay, we're on 2 different sheets of music.
Right. Here. Yeah.
So. And it may be just even a personality issue between the two of you. I don't ever want to stand in someone's way, but at the same time, I want to be able to be open and honest and straightforward. And so I think that's critical in management from a C-suite type of position, but all the way to, the packagers on the floor, man, I love those people. They stand there all day and package ice cream. And I can't thank them enough for the job that they do because it's critical.
We wouldn't get the product. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So hopefully that answered.
Absolutely. That's a masterclass of just leadership. I think, the biggest thing that you said of you have to be healthy first. You have to be healthy within and lead yourself first. Because I do think, they say if you don't get whole, you'll bleed on others that never hurt you, and I have seen a lot of leaders. I'm in the a content agency. I've been running a company for 7 years, and I have a lot of clients where I have great leaders that are clients that I look up to, and then you have some clients who are like, hey, you know what, like you can definitely see improvements, and you can see how they treat their employees and their team. You're like, man, like there's a lot of maybe personal issues that they're bleeding on their team, and you can see it, you can feel the tension, and typically there's not a lot of retention in those people because like you said, like you as a leader, if you're always up and down like this, like and not steady, and people will take their cues from the leader of like how things are going, of like,
and people watch every day you walk through that door, they're watching you, and how you react to situations, how you treat them. Do you know their name? Simple things can make the world of difference. And so I think, and you're gonna have bad days. I mean, there are days that I got to go in, maybe something I'm dealing with personally, or the dog ran away or whatever it might be, or a lot worse. But I think that you have to recognize that people do pay attention and they're watching, and so that's why I think it's critical that you do stay whole and realize when I walk in there, you don't want to be fake. You don't want to put on a fake front. And people, my personality is, you could tell, and especially those that are close around me, say, you're not having the best of days. I said, no, but we're going to get through this.
Wow.
And keep that, that positive attitude.
Wow, that's so good. So one of the questions that I do have, and again, running a team of 3,500 employees, I'm not sure what at the height of where you were at, what it was doing revenue wise, I'm assuming 8-9 figures, annually. And, there's pressures of that, right? There are a lot of people who are depending on you. And clearly, obviously, you're a man of God devoted to Christ. And how did the Lord help you throughout that time? Because that's a lot of pressure that you can take on yourself of trying to figure it out. Like, how did you kind of have that anchor as you were leading that charge?
Well, I was definitely blessed by those before me, the template that they had put together over the years of doing what we call selling and making, or making and selling ice cream. And so to watch them and see how they operated, profits are always at the top of everybody's list. At the same time, that wasn't the total focus. In fact, the focus was being the best you could be, making the product the very best you can. And you want to do it profitably, but you also want to not compromise and cut the corners. So I think stepping in, having that, and being that close to watching it, being on the board of directors from 2010 on, and really hearing the conversations was just a tremendous help. It was more of just don't mess it up than it was I think a lot of times leaders want to come in and they want to make their own mark. And when you start shifting it to a me thing or an I thing, look at what I've done, look at, this creative idea, you can get in trouble. But at the same time, God's placed you there. I think you want to dream again and you want to do the right steps, but you don't want to do them for the wrong reasons. And so the company had been so successful over the years, and the passion that was behind, what we did. But it was a challenge more of, okay, what's the next steps? We're in 23 states. Which one's going to be number 24? When do we take that market? From the flavor selections to just the product selections, making sure you're really, dotting your I's and crossing your T's. But luckily, the 100 years before, made it a lot easier to go with confidence that if all I do is just hold on, the car's going to keep going straight. But you can't rest there. So you want to make sure that you're thinking outside the box at the same time. Don't compromise on your core principles.
Wow.
And so that's kind of the approach that I took. Everybody's going to have a different thought. Everybody's going to have a different, you ought to do this, or you should make this. And it comes natural.
If everybody was a leader, they would do it their way, and it would work every time.
And I found I was in that camp. I found, I remember it was a lot more fun on the other side telling, the president what to do than for now I got to sit and make those decisions. But and we did do some things a little bit different, but nothing that would change, again, the culture or change the real true direction that we were going as a company. And so I think that when we got to the end of the 43 years, and that was my question, is when do you step away? If God's placed you here, is this for me or for him? And fortunately, through prayer and through a series of selling the house immediately and the things, he said, I've got other things for you.
Wow.
And so I wanted to make sure, and it took about almost 3 years, 2.5 years to go through the process of and just the process of looking at and making the right decision for the company.
Right.
Moving forward, and they made a great decision, in my opinion.
Wow.
So support them 100%.
That's so awesome. I mean, you've led well. I mean, the most impressive thing in your story, outside of course your devotion to Christ, is just your steadfastness and staying the course. One of the things that I hear different things, and I'm like, man, my audience, they need to hear that. I love when you talked about motives, and it's funny, actually this morning I was the verse came to my mind of give me clean hands and a pure heart, right, out of Psalms. How important that is. And so it's interesting that was what kind of helped you as things are building, and you're leading this charge and you're taking new states, that if your motives are in the wrong place, then maybe decisions can be more of ego than what the right decision for the company is. Yeah. I'm curious your viewpoint on that, because I do think I think everybody would say, oh, my motives are great. My like I heard someone say once, we judge everybody on their actions, but we are generous to ourselves by our motives, and we give ourselves grace for our motives. But it's like, well, your actions are speaking what the motives really are. Yeah. And so I get how did you keep your motives in check as you were growing?
Throughout the career, of course, I talked about the one situation where I had definitely gotten off center, and that took that kind of a moment in time to thump me back into place. Yeah. But I really think that you have to, what's the end game? Do you want it for success today, tomorrow, for this year, 10 years, 50 years? And you got to decide, because that, I think, is critical on what direction how you make your decisions. To me, 50 years from now, of course, I'll be in heaven, and I really do think milk and honey is homemade vanilla in the Greek. But I pray that when we
Sounds
get there,
good to me. Yeah.
Boy,
I'd be okay with that.
A bowl, and here
exactly.
You go. Well done, my son. Start eating. But I think though that the goal that I had was, number one, it's not about me. I love the phrase that I heard a good friend of mine say, "It's all about me. It's not about me." And I want it to be about how the company's doing and successful. When people say they fall in love with Bluebell, that's what I want. I don't want it about me at all. And you have to get to that point because, believe me, they replaced me, and they're no one person. And so someone said, "What's it like?" People come up and they say, "You're president of Bluebell," and I said, "I'll be real honest with you. It has nothing to do with the title. If I just say I'm with Bluebell, like, oh my gosh, you're with Bluebell ice cream, because it's the product and the passion that goes with that, and that's what you want to capture. We all have egos, we all have pride. You want to be the very best, and so I don't want that to get muddied up.
Absolutely,
in the water.
Yeah.
But I think that it's for whose glory, and if you're doing it for your glory, then it can get muddied very quickly. If you're doing it for God's glory and He gets the glory, and the company, then in this case, Bluebell, same with that. Tell the kids, just work, as if you're working for the Lord, because that's what you're doing. But what's your purpose? Why are you here? And that doesn't mean you don't have, again, the passion and the devotion to it, because you want to be the very best.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you go home at the end of the day, if you think, I gave it all I could today, I left it out there. Then you're right where you should be, but you have to self-check yourself, and that's why I go back to Romans. Yeah. Because you offer yourself as a living sacrifice. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. 80% or 70%. Right. And He is there to love on you like we never could comprehend. Yeah. But pride, started in the garden. It started. It's kept knowledge following us. Think about knowledge. Or life, everlasting life. Wow. And we chose knowledge.
Wow. I never thought about that.
Yeah,
wow.
We chose knowledge. And yet we wake up every day. What are we going to choose? Well, every day we stand in front of those trees. Now, the tree of life has been removed. But I'm just thinking maybe that was the initial plan. I've always wondered if we'd have chose life, would the tree of knowledge been taken away? And this would be heaven as we know it.
Yeah.
No more tears, no more all those things that come. But it's fun to go there.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, I think because we live in a broken world and because that part of that, obviously with the snake, you're not going to die. You're not going to die. In fact, you're going to be just like him. Where did pride come from? Right there in the garden. So for me, I think it's a self-examination, self-check, and making sure again those little things on the right side or the left side of the road when you cross over, they pull you back in, and you stay plugged in where you should be.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that's so good. Part of that is honesty with yourself. Right. What I'm hearing. Yeah. Right. And for those who are listening, the takeaway of you need to be self-aware now. Like, let's say like you're that guy that was in the interview of like, hey, in 20 years, I want to be CEO. Right. He needs to start being self-aware of his motives now because that's going to carry him through those years. And I think I heard I think John Maxwell said you need counterbalances in life. So the counterbalance to generosity to wealth is generosity.
That's right.
And the counterbalance to power is accountability. Yeah. And so if you know yourself and you're saying, hey, you know what? I know in my core, the flesh part of me, I'm egotistic, or I'm narcissistic in nature, or I want things my way, and I like control. Like, and the Holy Spirit's so kind, right? That's what the conviction of the Holy Spirit is, actually His love of like, hey, here's a little warning here. Right. This is something you need to be, and to have people in place. And that's why we need community. That's why we need the church. Right. So you can have people. I have people in place that help me. They know my weaknesses. They know my shortcomings, and they hold me accountable. And I know to call them of like, hey, I might not have done an action, but say, hey, I'm thinking about it, or my my intentions have just not been good, and they can help me and pray for me and all. But you have to know yourself to know what boundaries to put in place to help you not to go there. Yeah. And
I love the accountability partner or accountability group. Your family knows you better than you know yourself. Yeah. So if you really want to gut check, see how king of the hill you are when you go to the door. And those same principles, apply because they can remind you that you are imperfect. And yet that's a great place to start the next day and get back after it. But,
absolutely. And I mean, speaking of that, of a family, so you have how many? You have 5 children?
We have 5 children. We're a blended family of 5 children, and we'll be we're at 26 and a half. If you want to look at half, 27 years in February. But
it's beautiful.
8 grandchildren.
Wow.
And that's part of living life at this phase. Spending some extra time with them.
That's so awesome, and so I'd love to hear even what you're passing on to your kids and your grandchildren in this season after 43 years and all these different things. And as you're in this new stage, I'd love to hear, because one of the things we've been teaching a lot throughout this podcast that, I believe in inheritance in Scripture. Of course, it says a wise man leaves, inheritance to his children's children. I don't believe it's just wealth. I think it's a way of living of hey, here's how we live and on the foundation of Christ and all those different things. And now that you're in that mindset, what are things that you're intentionally, developing and putting in that next generation coming?
Yeah, a great question. In fact, I'm sitting there as you're asking and thinking if they heard this podcast, would they be going, yeah, that's right? Or would they going, what? Wait a minute, what?
Yeah, that's new information.
And luckily they're not here, but at the same time, I think that they know you better than you, or they at least see the whole picture, not just part of the picture. Right. But what I saw in my parents and really the way they raised me of not just checking a box on Sunday, not just attending, but having a relationship. They just said, look, have a relationship with Christ. Give him your all and walk with him daily. And they lived it. I mean, they literally lived it. And so, we've had some exciting times as a family, and we've had some really rough times as a family, especially when you blend family.
Yeah.
We've gone through some tough days, but you want to let them know and show them that, look, at the end of the day, Christ will never fail you.
Yeah.
He is always there. And don't look at me, look at him.
Yeah.
And yet communicate. The dynamics of children can be wonderful. I'm understanding today more and more about the grandchildren because you get another chance.
Exactly.
And you get to send them home. They don't get to see maybe the whole thing. But I think that as a married couple, though, and I really want to stress this, it's so important, number one, to have boundaries in your marriage. You've got to make sure you keep your relationship with your spouse whole. And when I say that, especially when we talk about wanting to move up and aspire to be in a higher position, I shouldn't say this, but when someone says it's not the time for my family and me, I say then praise God. I mean, I say that then this isn't the time. You are smart enough to recognize the fact that the dynamic, the pride in you would say, I want to go, but yet the foundation of your family says don't. On the other hand, if God's saying it's time to go, you go. But we've got a lot of just great people that have said, look, my wife has a really good job, a really good career. And I don't want to say they're comfortable, but life is good. And so to uproot that and roll the dice, they have to make that decision. They have to know in that process. But I've never held it against someone that said, look, today's not the day, but don't forget me, or don't, if this opportunity comes down the road. Because that means they're analyzing and checking the boxes the right way and their family where they're at.
Right.
But I think keep the marriage whole. Just like I say, put that boundary around, grow in that marriage.
Yeah.
My wife has been incredibly supportive. There have been seasons where I'm up there early in the morning to late at night.
Yep.
At the same time, there's seasons when things do calm down, and man, you got to take advantage of those and let her know how much you care for her and that she's just as important and obviously more important.
Right.
And so anyway, I put a lot out there on that.
No,
but,
that is helpful.
It's a journey. But I go back to purpose. What's God have for you and how He can use you in ways that you can't imagine, and ways you may not even know until one day in heaven where someone comes up and said, if it wasn't for whatever ... I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And like the book, if one person's saved because of this book, then
that's
praise
worth
God.
it.
It's worth it.
That's
absolutely worth it. Yeah,
that's so,
for the kingdom. It's a kingdom journey that we're all on. So
that's beautiful. I think of that John Maxwell quote where he says, real success is those who are closest to you think the most of you. And
it's powerful.
It's not, because I think sometimes it's like, there'll be a lot of people who may not really know you that, this and that, but, a tragedy would be if those who are closest to you, they couldn't say of the same. Yeah. I'm thankful for, my upbringing, wasn't perfect, obviously.
Sure.
But, having a dad who served the Lord, a mom who served the Lord, and, we're just present in there. And I think at the end of the day, that's what matters. I think,
that's right.
The career things, they're great. I'm sure inspiring, but I'm sure the things that your kids, they think of is like this man that I'm sitting next to, of like your character and your nature. That's what they're leaving with, and so I think that's beautiful.
I heard Rick Warren, I think he was doing a graduation ceremony of college. I just caught a little clip, and you may have heard it, but he said he spent a lot of time around those on their deathbed, and not one person has ever said, I wish I'd have gone after that one other plaque or that one other title. He said, but all of them will say, I wish I'd have spent more time with whether it be a child or a grandchild or relatives or people just in general.
Yeah.
I paraphrase that, but luckily we have 5 kids, and I'm going for the average. I'm going for the average.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love all 5 of them.
Yeah. No, I love that. No, that's so, and to me, why I talk about family on a business show is because, again, I
it's
think
a component. It's huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Typically, it's the, and I think it's really defining what the win is. And, you could be winning in your career, crushing it, climbing that ladder but at home you're failing, and or just not giving your all in the same capacity. And I just think that God wants us to have holistic success, and like you said, it's not easy. I don't think it's like a perfect balance, right? I think it's rhythm, right? You said it perfectly. Of like, there's some seasons like, hey, got to get there early, got to stay late. That's just the nature of it, right? But then those seasons were like, all right, I need to lean into family, and I need to, finding those moments. And like you said, you never fully get it perfect or right. No. But I think you just trust God and
identify it and do the very best you can with it. And if you're in the management side of it, you recognize that, boy, this person's been here for 14 straight days, then don't say, hey, I don't need you tomorrow.
Right.
Well, I don't have any vacation time. I don't need you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so there's ways that you can identify it, even from the top looking backwards. It's a very strong component. The family today is not where it needs to be by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. We are suffering desperately. Yeah. And I think that when we look back in time, the cell phone is probably one of the biggest enemies.
Yeah.
Technology, as great as it is, I remember so much of, I don't know how many families sit around the table. Breakfast and dinner, every breakfast and dinner.
Wow.
And even I'm guilty, even in my own family, as we run hard and you grab something and you miss that element of communication and growth as a family together. But anyway.
No, you're 100% right. No. And we got to implement it.
Yep.
As we're getting close to time here, I do want to touch on your book, Stories and Lessons from Fear to Faith. What's the biggest takeaway you want people to get from your book? Which I'll put the link for people to get it in the show notes. Yeah. But what's the biggest takeaway you want people to get from this?
I think it's fun about ice cream flavors and how we create flavors and pick them, and stories about the ice cream. What I really do hope deep down is that we're all going to have seasons in our life that we're going to struggle, and that when you are in a point where fear is overwhelming you, that you can find peace in the middle of the storm, that you can turn fear into faith. I use Mark 4, when the disciples get on the boat, they go across, and where do they find Jesus? He's asleep, and the waters are coming over, and they're bailing buckets of water during the night. I just can visualize this, and they go wake him up, and they question him, don't you even care? We're going to die. We're going to die. And of course, he stands up and does a mic drop. Everything goes still. Yeah. And he questions them. You have little faith, but in what he's trying to really get across is recognize I'm here.
Yeah.
And so in my journey and my tough struggles, I literally would visualize myself curling up as I would get into bed and say, okay, Jesus, if you're sleeping, I'm sleeping right there. Why?
Wow.
And if you can do it, then I can do it, no matter the outcome. And if you can get to that peace that passes understanding in Philippians, knowing that James 1 says it's pure joy.
Yeah.
You've got these two anchors. I think that the fear into faith is that message in this book is, look, you can find a peace in Christ. It's a choice, and the last chapter is called The Choice. You choose which path. You choose every day you get up. And is it going to be hard? Absolutely. Absolutely. Are you going to have some highs? Absolutely. You're going to have some incredible lows, but enjoy the journey.
Wow.
Enjoy the journey.
Wow. This has been so inspiring. I am challenging if you are a Faith Hustle person for real, I want you to buy this. We're going to read this together because this is my copy. I'm taking this. But I'm excited to dive into this myself because I need this. I need this encouragement.
Yeah.
Faith Hustle has been a dream of mine for years. And, you start out and, just like anything, I've been a business owner for a long time, not a long time, but, a little while now. But starting again fresh is like, okay, it's a new kind of stretch and there's fears. And I'm like, oh man, I didn't know that fear was there. Yeah. Okay, there it is, Yeah. And so I know I'm going to be inspired by this. And, you said so many incredible things. I guess the last thing I would just ask is, what would be if you had one wisdom, and you've said so many amazing things, but if you had one thing of wisdom to say to someone that, again, is in that 20s to early 30s, they're just kind of blooming and starting in their business or career, what's one wisdom you would tell them just to leave them with?
Well, I haven't done it today, but I will quote a great author of mine, Mark Batterson, who I love his writings. He has a saying in the book If, that the day you start dying is the day you stop dreaming. And yet, ironically, the day you start living is the day you find a dream worth dying for.
Wow.
And when I read that, I just underlined and highlighted it. Dream stinking big. Dream big. But at the same time, pray for your purpose. Pray for the passion to go with the purpose. And then pray that he will give you the patience, knowing that it's going to be a journey. And as you climb and you stop and you look out and you look down and you get fearful, look up. Look up. Keep your eyes on the master.
Wow.
And you'll reach your dreams.
Wow.
He puts them there. So,
yeah.
Anyway, that would be wrap that thing up. I don't know where it came from. Batterson just came to my head.
Hey, you can quote it yourself. Hey, I would believe you. No, thank you for this. This has been so good. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
Really, it really is such a huge honor for me to have you sit down at this table. And I know those who have been listening, you've been inspired by this. And so thank you for your time.
Thank you for what you're doing, because together, we're kingdom builders.
Yes, sir.
That's what it's all about. So let's hustle together.
Absolutely. And absolutely hustle together. Come on, Faith Hustle.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of the Faith Hustle podcast. We hope you were encouraged, inspired, and feel equipped to walk out your faith hustle. If you want to come on this journey with us in growing in our business and faith, I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, whether it be on audio platforms like Apple or Spotify or YouTube. We would love to take this journey with you, and we can't wait to see what God does in your business. We look forward to seeing you soon.